Welcome and thank you everyone for joining us for another Twitter Space. Today is August 3rd, 2022, and this is episode 6 of the ledgerscale Internet of Value focus topic. Now, ledgerscale Foundation was founded with two goals in mind. One of them being we want to provide educational services to not only our community, but to help scale up the entire digital asset community to understand how distributed ledger technology works. And two, we intend to one day run hardware to provide infrastructural support to the distributed ledger technology networks that we believe are ESG friendly and running a form of decentralized consensus. We host these spaces Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday, starting at 3:30 Eastern Standard Time. We typically keep them for around an hour and a half to 2 hours. And on Wednesday, we host a focus topic space from 5 to 6 Eastern Standard Time. If I could just ask if you could follow LedgerScale on Twitter and turn notifications on so you know when we're going live, and as well as retweet the space so that not only you, but hopefully other people in the future will find this information valuable.
Yeah, and like normal, we're here to engage the community. The focus spaces, maybe there's not quite as much engagement as an open space, but if you do have a question about anything, please ask and speak up, because I guarantee someone else will have the same question. And if you do speak up, just please be cordial. And today we're talking about complexity theory and like how all that applies to the networks and everything around. All these blockchains are basically networks, and I don't really have like an outline here, but to I guess to just kind of kick things off. So complexity is generally speaking what you do there is, so like regular science, you kind of focus on the things, so there's nodes and edges. Right. So in regular science, nodes are things, edges are connections between those things. And so in regular science, you kind of ignore the edges and focus on the nodes, versus with complexity, you kind of ignore the nodes and focus on the edges, which it's like creates the structure of the network, the topology, the graph, whatever you want to call it. And I mean, I can keep going on other subjects, I don't know where, but does that make sense, or am I already out of line?
I think I was a little higher up level, but the biggest thing from this conversation, and this, I think we're going to have a lot of engagement in this one, is if you have a question about any of the things we're talking about, just stop us and come up. As long as we just stay on topic, there's no problem with that. As long as we're talking about what we're here to talk about today. But yeah, right. So and another oversight, right? It's going to talk about how networks work, right, and why networks are designed in these specific manners and ways, and the complexity.
Well, yeah, I mean, that is kind of the goal, is to like, this is the framework with which, okay, if you're going to build a networking business, which every single blockchain is a network. Okay. So if you're going to be in this blockchain business, this is the type of thinking you use to design and build your network. So, there's emergent properties. I mean, actually, I think, and this thinking applies to pretty much all fields. It's not just economics or computer networks or anything. Telecom networks, it's your human body. So anyway, so you've got, oh my goodness, there's so much stuff. You've got, there's no way we're going to go through everything. So you have like complex adaptive systems. Think of that as like an environment. So, all the different animals and plants are in weather or doing whatever it is that they do. And the system just kind of evolves and goes along. Then the system will create like emergent properties. Okay, so like look at the world right now. The world has created an emergent property that apparently the human species keeps growing in population. right? And biomass. I mean, it doesn't matter which way you measure it. Like the species is just exploding. So that's like an emergent property. Money is an emergent property, in my opinion, of humans. Once you get, like, if you go to like small tribes, like up in the mountains and stuff, where I've been to some places, like they don't even have money. It's not a thing. But then if you go down the mountain and there's more people, once you get a certain number of people together, all of a sudden there's this need for this like money thing. And so then like humans create it. And if you look back through history, the same thing happens all over the world. None of these people ever talked to each other or ever knew even the other folks even existed, right? But they all sort of come up with the same emergent property. This idea of, oh, well, let's make a money thing. This will just like make things easier, basically. So emergence is a big principle. Um, and then to bring it back to like Internet of Value, so you know the Internet of Value is a network of networks. Well, what you call a network of networks is a multiplex. So it's really and there's rules and math, and I don't know all of it, but there's rules and math that you can use if you have need, that you can look up. I mean, I've looked at it before. It's not super duper complicated. It's there. So if you need it, it's there. Um, and So like if you're trying to build a network like a karma coverage or something, like I used a lot of these principles and stuff from complexity and kind of designing that business model. Um, it's really just, quite frankly, the way things work. Um, there's there's the Santa Fe Institute, but there's also like traders and stuff who have made entire careers, and they didn't have these terms. Actually, George Soros, there's a prime example. Now he doesn't know all these terms and the formalization of it through complexity, but he's rethought up the same exact principles, right? And it's all about looking at the flow. Well, if you're going to understand the flow, well, then you got to understand how the network's connected and what those connections are and what the state of them is. Um, and he's got some term he uses. I forget what it is, but it's the same idea as one of the things from complexity. And um, oh, it's on the tip of my tongue. It's a good idea. Basically, he's talking about a positive feedback loop. So one of the things you want to look for is if you've got a network and you've got all these connections, and I mean any sort of software engineer is going to know, like, the last thing you want to do is create a loop. Well, a positive feedback loop, it could be both, detrimental or positive to the underlying network, but like, consider the human population growth explosion a positive feedback loop. Like, we keep getting smarter and more capable, and then there's like more of us, right? Um, there could be a negative feedback loop where like we keep getting dumber and less capable and just sort of die off, right? But it's still technically a positive feedback loop because it feeds back on itself and it just keeps getting more and more of the same. So that's a concept you got to know and keep an eye out for, because you definitely want to catch those in terms of investing. And I definitely think there's a positive feedback loop here in the blockchain industry. I'm not sure I can take this conversation a couple different ways. Does anybody have a question? I don't want to just talk.
I liked it so far. You can keep going, at least as far as I'm concerned. But yeah, if anybody has any questions, please come up.
Yeah. I mean, it really is once you understand the perspective I think sometimes in these, at least in the open chats, I say stuff and I'm not always sure people understand where I'm coming from, but this is where I'm coming from. Like, this is the, when I say like, oh, I mean, obviously not in detail, but in essence, um, I kind of see the networks in the picture in my head. And then that, I think, helps, at least it helps me think and see things that I guess other folks don't exactly see quite that same. But it's not because it's just because that I know these principles, and I didn't make any of this stuff up. This is all actually the Santa Fe Institute. If you're into this kind of thinking, the Santa Fe Institute is where to go. They're the hub. And I know some professors that the anthropology guy, actually, they use a lot of this type of thinking in anthropology because you're studying like human systems and networks, and everything's changing in Africa, and the way that all the people are interacting with each other and the communities and where they're moving, and everything's in flux. And they're using all this same knowledge, and they're all he's intertwined, and his wife's a professor too. They're both intertwined with the Santa Fe Institute folks. I mean, this is where a lot of this knowledge emanates from. Actually, it would have been great to invite. I should have invited. I'm in touch with one of the guys there that does their social media stuff, but he's more social media instead of like actually knowing. No, he knows what he's talking about. But okay, Tony or ML, whichever one of you guys want to go.
ML was first. You're gonna go ahead, ML.
Oh, thank you. Quick question. You talked about positive feedback loops. Can you classify them as either positive or negative? And I don't know if you want to go here, but how do you classify them? What are the standards by which you gave an example about humanity? How do you classify it as either positive, negatives? Are there standards to do that?
A positive feedback loop is something that like sort of re-encourages itself, right? Like if I do this and I make more money, and then because I have more money, I can do more of this, so then I make more money. So then because I have more money, I can do even more of this, so then I make even more money, right? That's a positive feedback loop. Now, positive feedback loops can unfold in either positive or negative direction. So the positive feedback loop could help a system grow and explode. This is when you see things like going viral, right? Going viral is effectively creating a positive feedback loop. But that virus could be like COVID, or it could be like, what was that stupid Korean guy that did the dance video? I mean, it can go either way. COVID going viral, bad thing, right? I would classify as negative. Dance video going viral, okay, cool. Who cares? Like, if people are getting joy out of this, great. So the impact of the positive feedback loop is not a factor in like identifying a positive feedback loop. And you have some diseases actually, because a lot of the same math and stuff gets used in disease, and I mean literally going viral. Like there's complexity stuff on COVID if you go look it up. I mean a lot of it. This is all the math it's the same math you use in finance actually. It's the compounding stuff. Because once you can identify effectively like the rate of, so in finance you would call it the discount rate or the interest rate, or depending on which way you're using the formula, you call the thing a different, but it's the interest rate part. And then viruses are the same thing. Once you can identify the rate at which it spreads, right, then you can model out the compounding of how quickly this thing is going to go through the population. I mean, it's literally the same math.
Would you call them all positive feedback loops because they're happening? Or you don't call them?
No,
You say,
some feedback loops are negative, meaning they don't sort of self-replicate. This is a thing that you think of, okay, like with my other service, okay, it's a photo sharing service, right? So one of the criteria you look for, like, let's say I was a venture capitalist and I trying to choose from various opportunities. Um, Excel does not have a positive feedback loop. When you use Excel, you sit, and I trust me, I love Excel. Okay, near and dear to my heart. It's kind of my jam. Like when I really get into something and I need to solve a problem, I'm usually going to Excel. But you sit by yourself and use Excel. Okay, there's no feedback loop. Like how like what I'm going to show you the results of my work after, like that doesn't mean you're going to pick up Excel and become a new user. You're going to be like, oh, great work, Karma. That's a really pretty picture, right? Like that doesn't mean you're going to go sit down at your computer and start using Excel. So there's no positive feedback loop there. Versus like with the other thing, it's photo sharing. Well, inherently, by sharing photos at an event, you're engaging people. People find out about the service. They're like, oh, this is cool. They start using it, right? And there's more of a, does that make any sense? Like there's more of a feedback loop where you're, in order to use the service, you're going to be using it with other people. I mean, look
yeah,
at blockchain.
that
If I'm
makes
the,
perfect. It's not the, excuse me, I didn't mean to interrupt you. Just let me say, you just made it very clear. It has nothing to do with the actual result of the disease, as it were, but is it replicated? Do people use it? That's what constitutes the positive feedback loop. Like the Excel example, it doesn't mean someone else will use it. I think I got it correct. Am I wrong with that?
hang on, yeah.
Yeah. So that is that's a good way to look at it. And so I'll always say this, right? Like positive and negative is always it's an opinion, just like words are created by man, and words are just an opinion. And so in this instance of what we would call positive, this would be a positive inflection of what what was done, and then what is created from that, and then so on and so forth, a recreation of the occurrence of what was done in the first place as a positive feedback loop. So yeah,
Thank
it's
you.
exactly what you said.
Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, you don't, if you're like a developer, which is probably some in here, I don't know, but like it's one of those things you don't want. You absolutely, they don't call it a positive feedback loop. They just call it a loop, right? And if you create a loop, you'll crash a system because it can never figure out the answer. It just keeps asking the same question. It's like the oh, I'm gonna get half closer to you. Okay, no, now I'm gonna get half closer. Now I'm gonna get, like, you can never actually finish the problem because you're always only getting half closer. And then that crashes the system. So, but that's something to look for in the economics of the business. And I do see these blockchains. You think of liquidity. Okay, first off, to go back to the Excel example, I could create my own blockchain, my own karma coverage version of Ripple D. And I mean, I kind of did this a few years back, except I'd used the mainnet. But and and I could trade, I don't know, karma dollars or something between myself and myself, and I could do that all day long. There's nothing, there's no, it's completely useless. So the whole point of these blockchains is, this is why I think it's more about building trust, because you network people together, everybody can trust the system, You know, I trust that if you send me an XRP, it's my XRP, right? Or if you send me something else on Ledger, fine. But at least it's mine. It's in my wallet. I control it, right? Like I can trust all this. So you and I are able to make connections. This is one of the biggest criticisms I have of Bitcoin compared to Ripple or to XRP Ledger is you can't make any connections on the Bitcoin ledger. The only type of connection you can make is a payment. Versus on XRP ledger, you can build out, and when you're looking at networks, you want to see a dense network with lots of connections, as long as they're not frivolous. And like you have trust lines, order books, issued assets, payment channels. There's all this stuff, and you know that can just build such a more robust, dense network. Not even that's not even acknowledging the additional functionality that some of those features provide.
Apologies, I don't mean to keep focusing on this one issue. Positive feedback loop may be quantified as use of the network, spreading of the network, possibly in economics profit. Is that wrong?
No, that's fine. Like think of the telecom network, okay? If you're the only guy with a telephone, it's a rather useless machine. Brilliant, sure, but useless. The more people, I mean, Metcalfe's law kind of goes into this, touches on this positive feedback loop type thinking. Because the more people join the network, the more valuable that phone you already bought is. You know, if you can talk to 3 people, that's one thing. If you can talk to 300, well, that's a whole lot more useful. If you can talk to 3,000, well, holy wow, this is awesome. This is really oh my goodness, now you can talk to 3 million people. Like, and the more people that you can talk to, the more people join the network because it's more useful. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you.
It's but see, you wouldn't have gotten that 3,000th person if you didn't have all the prior people, right? Like that 3,000th person probably joined, you know, Facebook, right? Look at Facebook, another positive feedback loop. The reason most people joined Facebook was because most people were on Facebook. So it creates like a positive, like it reinforces itself basically. Just mechanically. It has nothing to do with the way the software works. It's more of like a market design economics type thing from my point of view. Anyhow.
And so in this, I would say in this age that we're in right now, right, as we call this the networking age, right, this positive feedback loop that we are seeing occur right now is the networking or attaching of networks of all of the different various systems that exist today. So this is
So like Internet of Value, right? So what is a ledger? First off, a ledger is a tool humans use to account for things communally, right? Like if I'm just sitting here accounting for my money and it has nothing to do with anybody else, then what the hell's the point? It's like me sitting here doing an Excel spreadsheet. Like no one cares, right? So inherently, this is why companies, which are groups of people, use a ledger because it helps build trust amongst the people who are participating in the company. I know you're not stealing, you know I'm not stealing, everything's good, right? It's all accounted for. And then distributed ledgers just take that and reduce the risk of having a single person be in charge, like a Madoff, right? Madoff could not have done his thingamajigger with on a public ledger because everybody would have just seen everything. And people even figured it out when they couldn't see. Just the SEC didn't do anything about it, which is ridiculous. But anyhow, that's terrible. My mother actually knows some people that were like seriously wealthy, and they lost probably like $100 million or something through Madoff. I mean, they had houses all over the world, jets, a yacht, the whole 9 yards. Yeah, I mean, but on an open ledger, everybody, no single person is in control of doing the ledger entries. So that's a big deal. That to me is the biggest thing. When these people, and like this isn't even defined yet, but like when the SEC came out and said uh Ethereum's decentralized. How? But what's the metric? By which metric did you determine that? Because to me, the proper metric would be, is there any single entity, person, or group of folks who have control over making a ledger entry? Because like when I run, like if I want to log in to QuickBooks right now and make a ledger entry on my company, done. I don't have to ask anybody. Nobody else has to verify or validate that that's a good or bad entry, valid or invalid, reflecting the truth or not reflecting the truth. Nobody can say anything. I just log in. I'm the one central controller. Well, the CPA's got the thing. Well, and somebody else does too. But anyway, nonetheless, that's the difference with blockchain. It's like I can't do that on a blockchain. I can't go to XRP Ledger and say, this account is going to pay my account 100 XRP. I just can't do that. And that's the big trust building factor. And trust is an element. This is one of the things I like about trust lines so much on XRP Ledger. I call it the trust graph. Actually, one of the early investors in Ripple stole that term from me and used it in a presentation he did in Europe to a bunch of fintech. And well, this is before fintech was word, but the trust lines allow you to look at this network structure of trust and allow all of these users to, I might trust you and not the other guy, but you might trust the other guy. So the other guy and me can still do a transaction because we can do it through you because I trust you and he trusts you. And I don't trust him and he doesn't trust me. Right? But we can still ripple literally through your account. Like this is all the stuff. This is why you want a denser network. The more connections you have, the more pathways there are to flow, and the more pathways. This is part of the reason why XRP becoming a synthetic order book, or the auto bridging is what they call it now. The big thing there is when you look at the computational power to find the path between, I don't trust this guy and he doesn't trust me, but we still want to do a transaction together, right? The shorter you can make that path, the cheaper it is computationally to the network. The cheaper it is to the network, the faster the network. This is why when they did that, the network's close rate went from like 7-8 seconds down to like 3-4 seconds. I mean, it's that significant of an improvement. And the main thing is it just made the number of hops that a transaction had to hop through to make the connection between the guy that I don't trust and doesn't trust me, right? So it's got to find a pathway. This is the routing function, path finding, what have you. And sorry, I went on a little thing there. I hope that made sense. It's all about the topology and everything, and there's so many other things we can. I could. Oh man.
And I know Tony had a question, so let's let him ask his question, and then we'll move on to keep talking about it. Go ahead, Tony.
Yeah, it's all good, guys. So in the video that Karma put, I think it was agent-based modeling one. There was a part where the gentleman said blockchain popularized artificial economies. Just wondering if, in what ways, or can you give examples of that?
Well, I mean, look at the NFTs. Like these are all like all of the I wouldn't agree with the word artificial if people actually put value into an NFT and it's, they appreciate it, and for whatever reason, maybe it's part of a game or they just like the art, or gives them rights to real estate or something, like whatever reason's irrelevant. If people put value on that, it's not an artificial economy. I do think that, so think of each, so on the agent-based modeling, think of each wallet as an agent. So you would go through, I think FOMO is probably the closest to this. He's not in here, is he? I've talked to him about some of this stuff before. You would do your analysis at the, say, wallet level. I mean, you could probably flip it and do the analysis but no, wallet level, because those are your individual actors. So, this is a lot of the work he does actually, is, he's looking at the exchange wallets and what the flows are between them, right? What's going in, what's going out, because directionality matters. I could trust you, but you don't trust me, right? Or you could trust me, but I don't trust you. So there's directionality when you're looking and analyzing the nature of the connections between the nodes. Think about that in a dating sense. I could like you, but you don't like me, or the other way around, right? So there's until you have like a match where you can have flow. What you want to do is design a situation where you have an even flow. So and the other thing with trust lines is I could trust you for, say, like $100, but you might only trust me for $50. So there's only $50 worth of match that we can do there in both directions. That would be your rippling. So you have not only directionality of the connection to look at, but also the quantity of the connection. And then, at least with trust lines, there's quality. So I could trust you, but I'm going to take a 3% fee if you trust me. So I trust you for 100%, you trust me for 100%, but I only trust you for 97%. So when the money flows through me, I keep 3%. So there's that aspect too. So you when you start focusing on these connections that make up the network, order books are a whole nother type of connection. But when you focus on the network and stuff, and the connections, you got to look at different aspects so that and when you look at banking, banking is a network business. Like correspondent banking, what is it? It's a bunch of banks that have accounts with each other. Okay, how's that not different than a trust line? Right? I trust you for $100 million. Boom, I'm going to deposit it into your bank. You trust me for $100 million or $50 million. Boom. That's no different than the example I just said, where you trust me for 100 and I trust, or whatever, however I said that. And anyway, it's one of us only trusts the other one for half the, so the amount of liquidity is the lower amount, the 50%, right? And the problem is, after Basel, I forget if it was 2 or 3, is all these Nostra Vostro accounts became not applicable, not accountable towards reserves. So that increased the cost of maintaining these connections through the correspondent mechanism, or the Nostra Vostro mechanism. And so a lot of these banks, and if you look at the details, like the actual, market, they're closing down these Nostro Vostro accounts. So think of the correspondent banking as a network. that's unfortunately dying. Like it's falling apart. The connections between the players are getting pruned off, and so that's the opposite of what you want. With a healthy network, you want more connections, you want growing connections, you want like the positive feedback loop type stuff. You want more and more people, more and more users, more and more connections. You want them, instead of a connection for 100, you want a connection for 1,000, right? Instead of 1,000, 1,000,000. Like, instead of 97% quality, 100%. You want all these different things growing so that you can see the entire network and system grow. And it's just, the reality is, what's happening with the correspondent banking system is the opposite. It's pruning back, it's cutting connections, it's dying off. And there's no way humanity is gonna, we have to have methods to accomplish these chores, this job of moving money around. Just a thing that has to be done. And so this whole Internet of Value is kind of on the opposite side of the spectrum, and you're getting all these connections and all these new players and new entrants and old entrants trying to catch up, or incumbents trying to catch up. And you see the exact opposite dynamics in terms of like the network growth and the connections and the enthusiasm. When was the last time you saw someone enthusiastic about correspondent banking? Versus, and it's the goofiest thing in the world to me, but because this is normally like boring stuff, but all of a sudden it's, I guess, cool. It's like just a bunch of accounting stuff, honestly. But like all of a sudden blockchain's like a cool thing and everybody's excited about it and enthusiastic, and these are making new connections and more people and brains and actors into the world or into the market, and people are coming up with new ideas like smart contracts, NFTs, AMMs. All this stuff, dude. I don't think you have to be a super genius to just observe reality and say, well, let's look at that. Let's look at that situation right there. That's what that is. Holy cow. You got one system dying off, another system burgeoning. What do you think's going to happen? Like, this is one of these things where I say this stuff and people think I'm crazy. And then a few years later, they're like, oh, you remember that crazy thing you said? And like, yeah, what else did you think was going to happen? You got one system growing just as fast as it possibly can. With all the enthusiasm, you got more connections, more technology, more networks, right? We were talking about the Solana thing yesterday, but you've got all these different networks. You got people like Flare who are going to network these networks together. This is one of the reasons why I don't think broadly Flare is appreciated to the degree it probably should be. They're networking the networks together. They're a multiplex. So that's a big deal, dude. That's the big deal. Like, that's a powerful place to be within an Internet of Value, is the guy that connects everybody. It's like your sales guy who's got his Rolodex. Okay, take the Rolodex away. Well, how useful is that sales guy? If he doesn't have anybody's phone number and he can't connect to anyone, what good is he? He didn't make the product or service, whatever it is he's selling. He's not managing anything. He's not fixing anything. What good? It's really that important. It's critical. Flare's basically going to be as a network. It's going to be a hub network within the networks that make up the Internet of Value. At least that's the way I see it, assuming they execute effectively. They could screw the whole thing up and it becomes nothing. That's obviously a deck in the cards. I don't think it's likely, but it's deck in the card. It's a card in the deck.
One of the models, I know it's a little bit of change the subject, but one of the models in that video was the Schilling segregation model. That was pretty interesting, and how it just everything separates and starts to kind of he gave an example. It's like pretty much modern day racism, because it's like how everything just people tend to go where like other people are similar to them. Can you expand on that as well?
Well, yeah. Google the term social physics. So that's basically complexity thinking applied to sociology. And they've actually done things there. So resilience is another big term you hear. So there's like emergence, resilience. There's a bunch of terms that are, once you kind of know them, they pop out at you. But yeah, so they've done things. So a lot of cities like Boston and Chicago have now resilience officers. And what their job is, basically, because they've done enough of these tests to to see if and it's possible is the answer, to help improve the economic economic aspects or reality of an economy, like a local economy. And one of the things is, so they did a study where they look at your, actually Google got in trouble for this, but they look at your like Wi-Fi network your phone is on, right? And they can see if throughout the day your phone goes from Wi-Fi network 123 or cell tower 123, right? So based on that, they can tell kind of how much you're getting out and how so then they're looking at the same data for everyone else in the town. I think they did this in San Francisco. They did it in, I think, Italy. I think they did it in an African country or city or something. It repeated the study, so it's not a cultural thing. And basically, if you can design your city so that more people get out and like interact with more people, so it's like I was talking about with XRP becoming a bridge currency. I prefer the term synthetic order book, but
I think he
bridge,
used the example of income, like people
you
with
boost
higher income.
everybody's income goes up.
Yeah.
The more you get out and meet with people, right? Like basically think about what we're doing on this chat right now. Okay, it's not practically feasible for me to go meet with all of you every day physically. Like that's just not feasible. But we're still meeting up and exchanging ideas. So if you design a city in a way that, see what happened, well, at least, I mean, I'm in Florida, right? So like there is literally the other side of the tracks. And the thing with the other side of the tracks is it's isolated. Okay, so it's hard to, okay, now step back up to the whole community. Okay, so you don't care about which side of the tracks anybody's on. You're like, say, county commissioner, and you just want your tax base to go up. So you need all of your people, your residents, to just like make more money so they pay more taxes, right? So so in order to achieve that, the best thing to do is to make it to where people communicate better, and they go to, restaurants or parks, or do things where the folks engage with each other. And then just, it's almost like magic. It's almost like Adam Smith's what's his thing? What's Adam Smith's thing? It's basically emergence. Just his term for it. The something hand, invisible hand. Is that what it was? Yeah. So it's almost like the invisible hand, just like magically people they exchange ideas, and then I get a good idea from you, and I'm like, oh, maybe I'll go do that, right? And then you get an idea from me, and you're like, oh, well, that makes sense. I might give that a whirl, right? And so then people start doing stuff, and they make more money, and the whole economy goes better. I mean, this has been tested across cultures. It's not like a Western culture thing. It's all the cultures. It's just people, man. Like, people are kind of the same everywhere, really, honestly.
I'm gonna kind of interject right there. You're making a lot of good points, and it definitely makes sense what you're saying. And I agree with what most of you're saying, but and a lot of people are ultimately the same. I agree with that, but there are differences amongst people that are just cultural differences. There's, the biggest thing is cultural differences, and different parts of the country have huge cultural variances, even here in the United States. Like, people come here from other countries, they go to, maybe New York and Chicago, and they think they know everything about the United States, and they don't hardly know half, because there's a lot of different variances. I'm just talking United States. I know you're talking international too, but you're right. People are ultimately, they want to take care of their families, usually. They want to be friendly, usually. But people are different. We're the same, but we are different at the same time.
Yeah, but it's the deal is, when you mix this is actually one of America's, like, biggest kind of strengths, and I don't know how we got away from celebrating it, but we did somehow. But the fact that we're what do we call it? A melting pot, right? You're bringing all these different cultures, because there's one way that somebody, in Florida grew up learning how to. Actually, I could tell a really funny story on myself. Learning how to. In, all right, I'll tell a story. So, but prime example. So, like, I grew up in Florida, so I used to watch people get their cars stuck on the beach. Okay, and I'd just be sitting in the dunes, and if you go up to someone and try and help them right off the bat, they're too proud of themselves, and they're like, oh, no, I've got it. Okay, so you got to let them get to the point where they're frustrated and upset, and, like, they're going to be capable of accepting a little bit of help, and then you go help them. And so, in the beach, it's not snow, it's sand, and you just push the car, right? So now, fast forward, I'm up in DC. I got these anyway. Anyway. There's some people. We were going back to the house, and the car. It was in the middle of a big snow thing, and the taxi that we were taking got stuck. Okay, so I'm an idiot, and I'm thinking, oh, well, I'll get out and I'll push the car, right, just like on the beach. And once it gets some momentum going, the car will go on up the hill. Like, I mean, this what else would happen? Like, so I get out and I push the car. My feet went backwards and I face planted, like like an idiot. I mean, it's still funny to me today, but totally different. And people grow up in somebody that grew up in an icy environment, that the idea that I had would have absolutely never occurred to them. The idea that you're going to go out and push a car up an icy hill, I mean, how stupid is that? But, somebody, and so when you mix these ideas and these people that come from different, this is the melting hub or melting pot, whatever the term is. This, like, you mix all of these people with these different thinkings and different experiences, and then, like, stuff gets created. I mean, look at Silicon Valley. There's people from all over the world, all different skill sets. legal, accounting, finance, software, um, you know, investing. It's when you bring all of that stuff together that the magic happens, like the magic of humanity. Like this is where humans are so powerful, actually, as a species. I mean, it's it's a good thing, and it's
It is.
good to have differences.
It is good, but that's one of the beautiful things about the United States too, is that you can have a bunch of people from all over the world, from a bunch of different cultures and opinions of way of doing things, that can come here and find a common ground and work together and make things better. Because as an American, I can't go anywhere in the United States and live the way I want to live, but here in the United States, pretty much anybody can come here and live the way that they want to live. So that's a testament to the U.S. right there, of how there is a lot of acceptance issues here in the United States, but ultimately you can come here and you can be a Muslim, Christian, Jewish, whatever you want to do. You can just come here and be it. There's other countries where we cannot leave and we can't go over there and practice our faith or do those things here, but people come here and do that. So people have to remember when they come to the United States that you are able to do stuff that we might not be able to do in your country.
Yeah, I mean it's honestly a wonderful thing, and it really does. I mean, kind of trying to bring this back to blockchain and stuff. What blockchain is doing as an industry, or Internet of Value, I guess, is probably a more preferable term, as an industry, is it's connecting all these. So it's like taking that aspect. You've got an accounting tool, cool. That means we can now like trust each other and transact and do business without trusting each other. Um, and we can trust the system. And so it actually builds trust if you actually round that thought out. But so it's this trust building tool that is going to enable, I mean, everybody all over the world to come together in the same sort of melting pot way that America has enabled. It's a really fantastic. I mean, it's so exciting. It's hard to even articulate to me. It's like really, this is going to help people do what people do best, and kind of chip away at some of what people do worst, which is like bicker and fuss. Because there's no bickering and fussing. The cryptography takes care of that. And you just do whatever transactions you want. No one's going to make you do anything. You do what you want to do. And you can trust that even if you don't like that other person, their end of the bargain is going to be upheld. And that's a super massive, powerful thing. I mean, you couldn't.
It is.
Sorry, go.
No, I agree with you, and that's the beautiful thing about it. We're all here. There is no judgment. Nobody knows really, unless we're blatant, what necessarily our cultural background is, what our race is, what our religion is. We're just here. It's objective. It keeps things objective, and that's what I hope Flare Networks is able to do. I hope there's going to be developers and engineers that are able to build, very advanced financial products on Flare Networks where. I've heard different ideas float around that people are going to be able to get home loans, car loans, personal loans, all from their digital assets via Flare Networks. Have their digital asset be able to get the loan back in their native currency. Things like that could be built. And something like that is awesome because that nobody can be held back that way. And so if you need a loan, but can't go to the banker because he doesn't like your wife or because maybe he's a different race or religion or whatever than you. We do have those issues here in the United States still, even though it's not as much, we do have those type of issues. You can just go on an online decentralized platform and bam, you don't have to have someone's opinion decide your fate. You decide your fate as long as you have the assets to get, the loans or the funding that you need. Because that's the beauty about it. And hopefully we see those things, very shortly here. Because that's what people need and what I think people want, most people want.
Yeah, I mean, I can tell you there's people around here where I live, like this is going to sound terrible, but it's unfortunately true. They're like, I don't want black people in my office. Like they don't want to do business. It's weird. I mean, I don't get it. And I'm like, dude, you're here to do business, right? Like the guy wants to
Well,
do business. Like, what's the fuck?
that's sad, but it's not just black people too. People get that kind of twisted. There's others. There's people that don't want Arabs around them. There's people that don't want Jews around them. There's people that don't want Eastern European whites around them. We have all that in the United States. People think it's just black and white, but it breaks down into certain categories.
The problem with all of that is if you literally look at the math, everybody loses with that attitude. So if you take one node in a network that has this type of because it's an attitude that basically says, I'm going to cut connections. Okay, it's like what's happening to the correspondent banking system, right? They're cutting connections. So everybody in the network, it's like if I have a phone and all of a sudden everybody starts dropping off the phone network. Okay, my phone just becomes worth less and less and less. Like I can't call you, I can't call dude number 2 or 3 or 4 because you guys are all cutting connections, and it makes everybody loses. It's the stupidest freaking thing. I mean, and it's mathematical. You don't have to forget, like, I don't know, stupid people's opinions. It's not an opinion thing. It's just a sheer mathematical. Everybody loses when people start cutting connections like that. And somebody saying, I'm not going to do business with this other person is a form of cutting a connection, right? There's charts of Congress. You can see this over time. I wish I could find it. I used to have it on my old phone. But it shows this is one of the things that worries me with the US government. I mean, and you can visually see it. There's a animation that somebody did where they looked at the going over, I don't know, a couple of decades, the number so you like have a bill, right, or some piece of legislation or whatever you call it, I don't know, and they would look at how many people voted. So a vote, like a affirmative, was the edge, right? The bill was the thing being voted on. So when we were talking about like quality of the trust line and all this and that kind of thing, so that's the thingamajigger in the middle being transacted, the XRP, the issued asset, whatever, the thing being transacted, the vote. But then the nodes were the congressmen, right? And so the chart went across time, and it showed all the bills where, you had red team, blue team, right? So you got the in the back a few decades, there was a whole lot. I mean, you can just visually see it, a whole lot of overlap. Red team and blue team were voting to confirm the same bills again and again and again. And then slowly, there became less overlap. And then by the time the end of the animation, it gets to where basically if the red team votes for something, the blue team doesn't. If the blue team votes for something, the red team doesn't. Okay, this is an unhealthy network. This is like the opposite of what you want to see. This is not improving density. You would want to go back to that time period where you had all this dense connections between red team and blue team voting and all this overlap and connectivity, and it's crazy. I don't understand this is why I don't like the politics stuff. It's just stupid. They're just doing stupid. And anyway, I'm not trying to get on a political thing. I not at all. I really don't enjoy politics stuff.
Yeah, and we're right at that 6 o'clock mark. So ML, go ahead, man. You got your hand raised very kindly, and we'll probably close it up shortly after.
Yes, quick question, and it may be kind of a simple one. Is there a name in complexity theory for the propagation, what you talked about, the density of the use of blockchain? Is it positive feedback loop, or do they have another label for it?
No, there's formulas for that. There's multiple formulas actually. I meant to look them up before this chat, but then at some point I realized there's so much to talk about we weren't going to get to there. But no, there's different approaches to like different formulas for how you analyze the topology and make those judgments and ask certain questions. There's different questions that, well, you can ask questions in different ways, I guess. And on how you ask the question, you use a different formula.
Quick follow up. Will you ever get into that specifically? That sounds fascinating. Do you have time? Not today, but maybe in another discussion.
I mean, it's not so okay. So like this lady came over. She was a finance major too, and she was a senior. And I had a few classes with her, and so she was confused, and I was trying to help her understand some stuff for an exam. And she did. I'm sorry, but I gotta kind of laugh, and I know she'll never hear this, so that's fine. But she thought that each one of these classes, she thought she was learning a new formula, right? She didn't realize it was the same formula, just rearranged. There's only one formula in finance, as far as I'm concerned. There's technically two, but there's only one formula. It's just there's a lot of different ways to rearrange it. And I like halfway through helping her, I kind of said that to her, and I think it clicked for her. I hope it did anyway. Um, and you know, it's a lot like that. Like when you're looking at a network, there's different ways to rearrange how do you analyze the topology, and there's some of it's the same math. I don't know this math as well as I know the finance math, to be frank. um I wish I actually knew it better, but I didn't stumble upon it until a little later in life. But I'm glad I did anyhow. um but yeah, it's like there's just different ways, because there's different metrics that you can analyze. I forget some of them. There's like centrality. there's there's a formula for like it's not what you know but who you know kind of thing. I mean, some of this stuff has direct parallels back to real life. Like if who you know is like all the power players, well, then you don't really need to have 1,000 gazillion connections, right? But if you don't really know any of the power play, if you're not connected to any of the power players, then it's probably better to have like 1,000 gazillion connections, right? Like, I mean, that kind of puts you in the, so it's, yeah, there's different things. There's different metrics, I guess is probably the best term.
Thank you. That makes sense.
Well, this was a really great chat, and just like Karma said, this topic will probably be we'll probably go over this another 2 times or 3 times, probably at least this year, because this is a great chat to talk about. I had fun. I had a great time listening. I also thank everybody for coming up who was a speaker who asked questions, because we wouldn't be doing this if it wasn't for everybody finding this information valuable. If I could just ask if everyone would follow ledgerscale on Twitter, and turn those notifications on so you know we're going live. And just thank you everybody for coming out today. We also host these, or post these, I should say, on YouTube, just in case you like to watch them on a different platform. And hopefully we see everybody tomorrow at 3:30 Eastern Standard Time.